Good evening. My name is Maria Abrahamson, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County. I welcome you to our online forum featuring candidates for Ann Arbor City Council Ward 4. The candidates will be on the ballot for the primary election on Tuesday, August 2nd. The League of Women Voters works to expand voter rights and educate voters. We're a nonpartisan organization, and we're providing this forum as an opportunity for candidates to express their views related to their candidacy. Statements expressed by the candidates are neither endorsed nor opposed by the League, and the League does not certify any candidate responses to questions as accurate. Voters are encouraged to fact-check information shared at the forum. We bring you tonight's forum because we believe deeply that respectful sharing of views on community issues is vital to the functioning of American democracy. Our moderator this evening is Catherine Moreau, who will explain the forum and get us started.
Thank you, Ms. Abrahamson. And now it's my honor to introduce the candidates running in the Democratic primary for Ann Arbor City Council Ward 4. Dharma Ackman, Elizabeth Nelson, and Mojgan Savabi-Esfahani. Thank you, candidates, for participating in this forum. The forum will follow this format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. In between, I will ask questions which came from the community. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. At appropriate times, the timer will raise a sign on her screen indicating the time remaining, 30 seconds, and then stop. If you have used up your time, you will be allowed to finish your sentence, and then your microphone will be muted so that other candidates have an equal opportunity to participate. The candidates will begin speaking in alphabetical order by last name. Depending on the number of questions, all candidates will have an opportunity to be the first or last to answer the questions. We're now ready for your opening statement, Ms. Ackman.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting and moderating this forum. I'm Dharma Ackman, and I'm running to be your 4th Ward Council member. Currently, I'm an elected trustee and the Vice President of the Ann Arbor District Library. I've lived in Ann Arbor for 20 years. 17 of those years have been in the 4th Ward. I'm a first-generation college student. I earned my PhD in information science from U of M, and today I work as a research scientist at U of M's Institute for Social Research. I'm running because our residents deserve strong city services and good governance, because people who want to live here increasingly can't afford to, and because we're at a critical crossroads with climate change. To address our challenges, I believe Ann Arbor needs leaders who collaborate, problem solve, and build effective working relationships. I'll work across the table to ensure we have excellent city services, housing for people from all walks of life, and that we make tangible progress on our commitment to climate action through measures that improve our lives now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackman. And now, Ms. Nelson, may we have your opening statement?
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Nelson, and I have served on Ann Arbor City Council representing Ward 4 since 2018. I've lived in Ward 4 since 2004. 20 some years ago, I trained as a lawyer, but more recently, I became a teacher, and I currently teach at a local preschool. In 2018, residents told me that they wanted better access to information about the work of council. I observed then that a lot of conversation about local leaders and local policy was simply talking points and generalizations that were not particularly rooted in facts. I have worked hard these last 3.5 years to redirect our policy discussion to facts, with publishing nearly 100 voting charts and newsletters around our agendas and what happens at our meetings. Our educated community deserves thoughtful and serious policy debate. To achieve that, we must recognize how our democracy is supposed to work with transparency and accountability. Residents know me as someone who wants to understand the nuance and detail of the decisions before council. For me, that means listening to residents and looking for opportunities to hear and understand as many perspectives as I can.
Thank you. And finally, may we have your opening statement, Ms. Mojgan?
I am Mujgan Sababi Esmahani, an environmental toxicologist and a human rights activist, and that includes human rights of the Palestinian people. For 20 years, I have heard Ann Arbor City Council throw around words like affordable housing, diversity, equity, polluter must pay, time and time again. But we have no adequate affordable housing. We have segregated communities. Diversity is shrinking, and equity is just a dream. After 50 years, empty promises, Gelman contamination is the largest it's ever been, and it's growing. To change this situation, we must push against the laws which make this condition persist. We need $15 minimum wage for all workers in Ann Arbor. We need strong unions. We need public housing. We need to push the university to keep its 50-year promise of 10% Black enrollment. We need to push our good for nothing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And now to the questions. As a reminder, I will read the question once and it will not be repeated unless requested. We'll start with Ms. Nelson for the first question. Ms. Nelson, please identify the top 3 concerns that residents of Ann Arbor Ward 4 have expressed to you. If you are elected, describe the steps you would take to address one of these issues.
Thank you. I would say that the top 3 issues that I'm hearing from Ward 4 are infrastructure, investment in our roads, and our stormwater management, strategic planning in terms of land use, and related to that, the growth that is happening and how we manage it consistent with our 820 goals. I think that the biggest priority for me is making sure that our strategic planning around land use moves forward in a thoughtful way that actually engages resident participation. And that's going to include a lot of considerations around our 820 goals, understanding how our community can work so that more people can walk and access services that they need. Right now, Ward 4 is looking at where current plans and current zoning are not actually meeting that particular need, particularly looking at examples like the George, where that community lost a significant amount of retail and it has not been replaced, and it looks like it might never be. As we move forward and anticipate the inevitable growth in the area around Briarwood Mall and the recently approved Valhalla development, residents are going to be looking for someone who's willing to listen around what their concerns are, what their needs are, and how we can make our community more functional in a way that is environmentally sustainable. And that has been a priority for me since my election. How I would achieve this kind of engagement is probably a lot of the work that I have already been doing, engaging with residents in a meaningful way through my website, hosting coffee hours before every single council meeting, and alerting residents to every opportunity that I am aware of for them to engage in our processes of public survey, public engagement meetings. I really do believe that we can move forward together if we listen to each other.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Next, Ms. Mojgan, same question to you.
I'll unmute myself. I think people who I've talked to, they're seriously concerned about the different factions on the city council, and they are worried that this war between them is harming everything. It is absolutely true. There is factions on city council. There is the mayor's slate, and then there is slaves to the mayor and his slate. This is a big problem. This is an ugly problem. And everybody is concerned that mayor and his slate are not serving the public. They are serving the interests of developers. And they are concerned that we should address that. They are also worried about public house, well, the fact that we do not have affordable housing. I've lived in this town for 20 years and I've heard so much about affordable housing. We have crumbs, if anything. We need thousands of units. So when I am a member of the city council, I will push against laws that make public housing impossible. We must admit to ourselves that the problems we have now are systemic. The problems arise when we don't have laws to protect us against not having public housing. There are laws that prevent us from having $15 minimum wage. There are laws that prevent us from having public housing, laws that stop us from having unions. These are the things that people of Ann Arbor need, and they think about and they talk about. They also worry about Gilman contamination. It's over 50 years that this plume is growing, and we need to do something about it. Ann Arbor City Council has dragged its feet, rubs its elbows with the polluter, constantly saying polluter must pay. Well, they are not going to pay. They haven't paid. You haven't been able to force them to pay. It is time that we put our foot down and make sure we clean our own water. New York has done it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can do what New York has done, throw money at it and get it cleaned up. Because if we take any longer, it might become impossible to clean it. And then it will be forever for our children to deal with.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Ackman, same question to you.
Yes, thank you. So I've been knocking on doors around the ward since March, asking people to share their issues and what's important to them. And I'm hearing a lot about concern about poorly maintained roads, speeding and hazardous driving in the neighborhoods, and also our frequent power outages. Definitely by far though is the high cost of housing. People are worried about their kids being able to live here. They're worried about them being able to continue living here as their rents increase at a rate that they're not sure that they can sustain. And they're really troubled that people in our community, so teachers, nurses, and service workers are getting priced out further and further. I think that addressing this requires co-equal attention to three main areas. Number one, supply. We have to create abundant housing of all types. And it's true that building housing on its own is not going to dramatically decrease housing prices, but it can work to stabilize prices, and we have to act now. I'm very supportive of building housing and mixed use development along our transit corridors. I think that is the right place to be developing. And right now, a lot of these areas are dotted with sprawling parking lots, and I think we could be doing better with that. It also requires attention to stability. So you want to create strong tenant protections, such as an enforceable early leasing ordinance. Also subsidy, which I know is something that the city has been working on since we passed the affordable housing millage. I am thrilled that we're using some of the city-owned properties to develop affordable housing in creative ways with interesting partners, including local partners. And I think that these all have to be done together. I think paying attention to just one is not going to serve us well. It's a complex problem that many communities are dealing with, and I'm ready to get to work on it.
Thank you, Ms. Ackman. And now for the next question, Ms. Mojgan, you'll be the first one to take this. The Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority has a millage proposal on the August 2nd ballot to expand public transportation, resulting in 1.680 in net new mills. MLive reported recently that AATA ridership in 2021 was 27% of pre-pandemic levels. Do you support or oppose the transit millage, and why? Ms. Mojgan?
I think there is not enough that I can say that I agree with increasing our transportation facilities. Buses, multiple buses, more time for everyone to be able to use it. There is not enough buses that you can put on our streets. I am all for it. I think it should be expanded. There should be more of it and make it available to everyone, make it cheaper for everyone, make it more frequent so people can depend on buses from going from this end to the other end, not having to take many buses. It can go straight. I am completely for it. Unfortunately, we have not really made much of an advance on that, and we have to push for it. I am all for it. I think that this is a very great idea. It will cut down on emissions. We have all these proposals about cutting emissions, A20, this and that, but they are primarily primarily for show. They are not real. They cannot cut down the emissions as much as they need, but adding buses, more buses will help us in that, and I'm all for it. I hope that they will push for more public transportation than what they have now. And I think that instead of making ourselves busy with things like cosmetic measures like A20, while we know that that is not going to really make a dent in global warming, what will make a dent is things like this: increase transportation, buses, and I will be all for it. What is sad to me is that Ann Arbor City Council spends a lot of time talking about totally cosmetic measures, things like A20, which will not make a dent in global warming, but they want to keep us busy thinking they are doing something. These are not at the end gonna make any difference in global warming. We must not lie to the public and make them believe by doing those kinds of things, we're actually gonna achieve something. We are not.
Thank you. Same question to you, Ms. Ackman.
Thank you. So having access to convenient public transit is very important to me. Personally, it's something that I relied on as a young person getting around. I did not have the money to have a car of my own. And one of the things that made that possible was being able to live in a city that had good transit options that did not involve that. So I think that this is really, bus access is about our A20 plan. We have committed to reducing our single occupancy automobile trips by 50%. That is huge. So we're going to need alternatives to that. So I definitely support public transit. I am definitely, the size of this gives me pause. As I've talked to neighbors around Ward 4, they're definitely anxious about the costs. I'm particularly anxious about costs getting passed on to renters. I think it's a fine balance. We don't want to continue to push people out of our community because then they don't have access to a bus to get here, and then they are in cars. And so I want to better understand the details of this particular millage because it is quite large. People are feeling inflationary pressures, and I think that it has to be balanced with our desire to provide equitable transit options to everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Ackman. And finally, the same question to you, Ms. Nelson.
I have heard the same mixed response to this millage because it is so sizable, and I will confess to not having looked into the details of it at this point. What I will say, and what I've said to a lot of residents who, for instance, will say to me, I see all these empty buses. Well, you want more of these buses, you want more of these empty buses. And so I think that this is a very good opportunity to explain to folks who maybe haven't lived in a community with really functional public transit that we really have a chicken and the egg problem, which is that no one can rely on public transit as a regular mode of getting around unless the schedule is robust enough that you can rely on it to get to where you need to be. I think everyone who has lived in a community that has meaningful public transit understands this to be true. And so I need to do more research and understanding how this millage is going to support a more robust schedule. I've heard a lot of feedback from residents who point out that there are certain routes that need more coverage. There are certain traffic patterns that we need to understand really well so that we can identify like where people are commuting from Ipsy to get to here. What are the routes that need more robust support? It is certainly in our A20 goals to support public transit, and I support public transit a lot because my own family uses it. My son uses it every day to get to school. So I urge all residents to look at this millage carefully. And I also encourage residents to think about how public transit works better when we invest in it. I know from personal experience, looking at how my son could use the bus to get to school, trying to get home in the middle of the day, the challenges of that in places of the day where the schedule is less robust. This is what we really need to think about. And as was stated earlier, it's true. We need to get people out of single occupancy vehicles and into buses.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next question, Ms. Ackman, it will go to you first. Please give us a story of how you made a difficult personal or professional decision because of a core value that you hold?
Wow, that's a great question. A difficult personal, did you say, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Please give us a story of how you made a difficult personal or professional decision because of a core value that you hold.
Well, I guess I'll tell the story of I've made decisions in my life based on my commitment as an environmentalist, and they haven't always been the easiest options. I mean, we're at the point right now in my family that we could afford 2 cars. That wasn't the case when I was a young adult. It's the case now. I very intentionally do not own a car myself because I strongly believe that it's not an environmental way to get around, and I have other options. So, for the last probably decade, I've forgone that. I get around by bike. I have accustomed myself to riding in the winter. I learned from other people how to do that, and I made that a thing. And so I think, sometimes that involves a little bit of personal, I wouldn't say it's difficult in terms of physical hardship, but I think it's worth it. And I also think that that's an example that I am proud to carry into my life. I think it's influenced people that I work with, and I think it's a way that I live my values every day.
Thank you. The same question to you, Ms. Nelson.
I'm afraid that the first thing that came to mind was pretty deeply personal. My family struggled in a serious way when my father had a debilitating stroke, and there was disagreement in my family about who should be his guardian. My mother was not in a mental state to take that on, and we had a lot of debate within my family about whether or not it was worth rocking the boat and disrupting a relationship with our mother after seeing our father suffer. I took a pretty serious stand in my own family in defense of my father's care, because a core value for me is identifying where people are vulnerable and standing up for them. I've carried that core value forward in a lot of my work on council when people bring policy issues to me and identify who's in the vulnerable part of the equation. I am very sensitive to situations where stakeholders are not heard. My personal experience growing up in a family where family members suffered from mental illness taught me a lot about what happens when you accept the status quo and are not able to speak up. When people are in a position where they don't feel that they will be believed. I think that fundamentally I'm a much better listener because I am that much more sensitive to situations where people are vulnerable and they feel powerless and they don't necessarily expect to be listened to.
Thank you. And finally, the same question to you, Ms. Mojgan.
Thank you. I have been, since I arrived in the United States, been discriminated against. I've been told to modify my story so that it will get attention at all. Most recently, I was told that I was excluded from an Ann Arbor Observer story about elections, about Ward 4 elections, and I was quite angry about it. There is many more stories. When I first came to University of Michigan to do my postdoctoral studies, I wrote an article in the Daily, basically telling them about my observations when I was in Palestine, when I saw children be beaten and be shot and the parents crying in their blood. And I basically told them the way to go is to boycott Israel, cut off funds from an apartheid state that is abusing a nation for decades. And later I was told that it was the wrong thing that I did. I should never have published that article. And I thought to myself, I could shut up, but, and I was sure that this is going to jeopardize my chances in many ways. But I felt that if I chicken out now, how can I look at my friends in the face and say that I'm an honest human being? How can I ever stand up for the public? How can I ever disregard my own interests and push for the public interest? Right now on Ann Arbor City Council, we've got problems. Half of the council, more of it, the mayor's slate, clearly do not act in interest of the public. They act in the interest of the people who give them money to be reelected. This is a
Thank
problem.
you. Thank you, Ms. Mojgan. Okay, the next question, we'll start with you, Ms. Nelson. The Ann Arbor City Council has a reputation for contentious meetings and exchanges. Is this reputation deserved? If elected, how do you plan to work together with fellow council members to best serve the city's residents? Ms. Nelson?
I tell residents that when you make the effort to dig into the facts and details, you realize that our disagreements about policy are relatively small, yet we often talk about them emotionally as if they are enormous. People who choose to live here and people who would like to live here recognize that Ann Arbor is a special place. We typically share the same goals and are simply debating strategy on how to get there. How we achieve these goals and what it looks like in our neighborhoods is where people might have different points of view. When voting, I look at each issue individually, sometimes agreeing with the mayor and sometimes respectfully disagreeing, but always trying to represent the interests of Ward 4. My campaign has largely been financed by donations from Ward 4 residents, and I have taken no money from special interests like Lansing-based PACs. In 2018, I pointed out that we don't make good decisions when we simplify issues, define them as all or nothing, or insist that any dissent or skepticism is intolerable or unacceptable. Residents see this dynamic and see how it has gotten worse under a council majority that the mayor literally calls Team Taylor. In 2020, 5 winning candidates on Team Taylor reported spending over $150,000. And of that, $50,000 was spent on professional consultants and campaign managers, some of whom overlap different campaigns. We have seen at higher levels of government what happens when these team dynamics of big money, misinformation, and emotional rhetoric displace serious debate and thoughtful compromise. And I believe we can do better. I've worked hard to explain my thinking around issues with facts and information for residents to consider as well. I'm committed to serious and fact-based discussion of local issues of controversy. And frankly, I think that is the antidote for all of the worst that we are seeing now on Ann Arbor City Council.
Thank you. The same question to you, Ms. Mojgan.
Thank you. Yes, we have a big problem on the different factions on City Council. The mayor's slate was shot out of a big money cannon, and the rest of the City Council is just their slaves. The mayor and his slate washed into power on a ocean of fat cat campaign contributions, and boy, are they serving those contributors. The mayor's slaves can do little but to whimper. With all due respect, I have seen very little accomplished with Ms. Nelson in the chair of our elections. My compass, when I'm elected, will be the needs of the people. Workers in Ann Arbor need $15 minimum wage. They need a union. They need good public housing, and they need clean environment. They need good drinking water. I will work to achieve all of that. Why won't City Council immediately apply its living wage ordinance to maximum extent allowed by law to all workers in Ann Arbor? You've had the chance to do it all along. Why haven't you done it? Why haven't you done it? Why won't City Council publicly push for at least $15 minimum wage for everyone on every level, local, state, and federal laws? Why? Why not? Because they worry about their contributors and do not lose any sleep over the needs of the workers in this town. They do not care about us. Why won't city council just put shovel in the ground and clean up the Gelman dioxin contamination? It's gone on for 50 years. You think we believe when you say you care about environment, when you have failed so miserably to clean up Gelman contamination for all this time, while you hobnob with the lawyers and with polluters and you tell us you're getting stuff done, we pay the bill and you give us nothing back. We don't even have enough information. We need to change all that.
Thank you, Ms. Mojgan. And finally, Ms. Ackman, the same question to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think you asked if the contentiousness was well-deserved, and I think it is. I mean, I've seen it myself. I talk to residents, they're quite upset by the tone, the incivility, the petty personal attacks, and they're frustrated. I'm personally concerned, not because there's disagreement. A healthy city council should disagree. Diversity is an asset, and that means people are going to view things differently. That's good. But what's not good is when it resorts to infighting, incivility, again, the petty personal attacks. I think that it makes people disengage, our residents, who are very put off by that. And I don't think that you want that in your local government at all. What I bring to this role is, number one, a commitment to residents. I grew up with those values that government exists to serve people. Those concerns will be first and foremost in the front of my mind. And I also bring my skills and experience as a public leader. I manage a large, complex team of almost 40 in a complex, changing organization. I have skillfully navigated through a pandemic. I've built teams. I've helped failing teams. And I think that if you asked my colleagues, they would tell you that I'm an effective communicator. I'm someone that uses communication to build rapport and relationships rather than tearing them apart. And I would bring those skills to this job. I would be looking for good ideas and the opportunity to build them up, no matter who had them. And again, focusing on the residents who are first and foremost and do not need the distraction of the incivility and the petty attacks instead of practically working on and solving their problems.
Thank you very much. And now we'll have the final question prior to closing statements. And Ms. Mojgan, this question goes to you first. MLive reports that the city of Ann Arbor's population increased 8.7% from 2010 to 2020. Do you predict this level of population growth will continue in the current decade, and is such growth desirable?
I am not sure about that. I don't know if there will be more people coming. There is a lot of upheavals going on with wars, with recession, with a lot. So I don't know if there will be more people here. But what I do know is that we don't have enough housing, affordable housing, if they want to call it that, in this town for people who are already here. We have thousands, we need for thousands of affordable housing. And here and there, we get a little bit of a crumb from Mr. Taylor and his slate's favorite developers. We get a few crumbs from them. That's not enough. What we need to do is to recognize that we've got a systemic problem. We've got a problem with laws that prevent us from having what we need. And we have to recognize that mayor and his slate and the whimpering slaves of the mayor are unable to do it. They haven't done it. They do not push against laws that prevent us from having $15 minimum wage. They do not push against laws that do not let us have good unions, big unions. They do not push against laws that gives us the public housing. They haven't done it. They haven't even expanded the regular money that they give to their own city employees to everyone in this town. And they have shown us that they don't really care for diversity. They may say diversity until they're blue in the face, but they don't really care, because if they did care, they would push for the university to do good, make their promise happen when they said they will give 10% Black enrollment. That was 50 years ago. This city council, these people, the slate and the others who whimper, they have not done things to make this city more diverse, and they have done nothing to make it more livable for those who are low income or they have less money than $250,000 a year. We must
Thank
change
you.
that.
Thank you. And Ms. Ekman, the same question to you.
I would also say that I don't know what the pace of growth will be, but I will say that we have the really good fortune in Ann Arbor of being an economic and then higher education hub. We're a very desirable place to live, and I think that growth is here, and we need to plan for it proactively. We don't have enough housing. I would agree with that completely, and I think that we need to increase the level of housing of all types. So I'd like to see us respond to this by adopting policies that make our community more inclusive, that accept the fact that different modes of housing suit different people at different phases in time. Again, I think the transit-oriented development is really exciting, thinking about the compact, pedestrian-oriented mixed-use communities along transit corridors. I think looking at our zoning laws that currently prohibit multifamily housing in a lot of our neighborhoods, that's personal to me. I mean, I grew up in a renting household. I lived in a duplex, half of a duplex when I graduated from high school. Without those options, I'm not sure what my family would have done. And so I think the fact that we've outlawed that in a number of our neighborhoods, and that's not just an Ann Arbor problem, I think is an issue as we confront our housing crisis. So I think density done well and smartly, and I also would like to add that I think that there's missing from this a conversation about gentle density. We talk a lot about single family houses and high rises, and I think there's room to talk about more mid-sized things that aren't that much bigger than a house that exist in many of our neighborhoods now because they were legal at one time to build. And so I think things like that, density done well, I think can deliver a lot of benefits that improve our quality of life, increase walkability, and deliver city services at a lower cost to residents.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ekman. And finally, Ms. Nelson, the same question.
I'm going to add a third voice of uncertainty and not claiming to know the future. It's interesting, a lot of work that is now happening remotely may mean that people are living in different places and still working in the job centers in Ann Arbor. I don't know that to be happening, but I do think that growth is inevitable. It is not a question of whether you appreciate the growth or want it to happen. It's inevitable because the university is expanding and we are a job center and more people want to live here. Housing supply is a very real topic for discussion that I tried to raise in a way that I thought would be uncontroversial when I urged us to regulate short-term rentals. That was an issue that a resident brought to me as a nuisance issue in her neighborhood. And I later realized that it was very much a housing supply issue. We passed an ordinance that was very strong and then amended it to create loopholes so that now we have businesses that are unlicensed doing short-term rental under the radar because we have muddied the standard. Some short-term rentals are allowed in residential areas, some are not. You can't tell which is allowed and which isn't without actually like checking on records at the city. I think we need to have a lot of conversations about where we're losing housing in ways that we don't need to lose it. A couple hundred housing units should have returned to the long-term housing market if we had sustained the original ordinance passed around short-term rentals. And I think we also need to talk seriously about gentrification. And when we create zoning that is incentives for redevelopments and gentrification, what categories of housing are lost when we do that? So this is a very complicated question. And I think I'm always interested in talking more about what we can do to expand our housing supply.
Thank you. And now it is time for the closing statements. We will begin with Ms. Ekman, and you have 90 seconds.
Okay, well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters, to the moderators, and to my fellow candidates. This particular forum means a lot to me because I was on the other side, so I feel like I've come full circle. The greatest gift of campaigning and knocking on thousands of doors across the board has been talking and connecting with residents. You've shared your love for Ann Arbor and your experiences living here. I've heard your concerns about infrastructure and housing affordability and your frustration with incivility and discord on the city council. You want public servants that listen, that act with high integrity and engage in civil discourse to collaborate on meeting the city's challenges with practical solutions. I'm committed to these values, and what's more, I bring the skills and the disposition to enact them. I'll focus on improving the lives of Ann Arbor residents, and will work collaboratively with fellow council members, constituents, and staff to do so. I've already begun building a strong coalition of over 20 elected officials, community leaders, and organizations who believe in me and my ability to deliver, including Senator Jeff Irwin, County Commissioner Katie Scott, Mayor Christopher Taylor, several sitting council members, and the entire Ann Arbor District Library Board. To learn more about my campaign and how to contact me, please visit dharma482.com. I look forward to meeting and talking with you, and I hope to earn your vote on August 2nd.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Nelson, your closing statement.
Thank you. I am passionate about how local democracy can work in a city like Ann Arbor. As an elected leader, I look for opportunities to collaborate with residents to solve problems in our community. I am proud of my record. The biggest issues that I worked on these last 3.5 years were prompted by advocacy from residents. Residents pushed us to move forward with EPA intervention to clean up the Gilliman plume. It was a Ward 4 resident who alerted me to discrimination in rental housing, and I helped him bring that issue to the Human Rights Commission so that council eventually passed an ordinance addressing it. Residents asked for regulation of full-time short-term rental businesses that hollow out housing supply in near downtown neighborhoods. I brought that issue to council. I have worked closely with local tenants who pushed and continue to push us to amend our leasing ordinance to meet the needs of renters in Ann Arbor. I look forward to continuing the work I have already done, informing and engaging residents in our decision-making and responding to the problems that you identify in our community. I am committed to the idea that our local decisions happen in a local context among residents who will have to live with the consequences. I am supported by residents who appreciate that I consider issues thoughtfully and I listen. I'm not looking to build a coalition of other elected leaders. My commitment is to Ward 4. I encourage everyone to visit my website, a2lnl.com, and look at my endorsements to see and hear from the residents and Ward 4 neighbors who have worked with me and recognize what I contribute to our local democracy.
Thank you. And finally, your closing statement, Ms. Mojgan.
Thank you. The truth of the matter is that Ann Arbor knows that our city council does not work for the people. It works for special interests. It works for their campaign contributors, thousands and thousands of dollars. And those that the mayor and his slate endorse cannot do more than what they have done. They will jump on the bandwagon and they will do exactly what the mayor tells them to do. Ms. Nelson, I am in your ward. I have emailed you, asked you for things, and you've never responded to me. And I think that we need someone who will represent the working people in this community. I will be that. I will raise hell on city council for our human and environmental rights. I won't quit demanding an immediate cleanup of Gilliman dioxin contamination by the city. I won't quit demanding at least $15 minimum wage in Ann Arbor, which you've had ample time to do and you haven't done. I won't shut up about my resolution to stop military aid to Israel. Millions of people are dying, are suffering under massive, massive occupation of Israel. I insist that city council must work for the working people in this town, not for the rich, fat cats. That means I demand that Lansing and Washington tear down the laws they created to keep you underpaid and without a union. The entire workforce ought to be unionized. Then we can actually expect to have healthcare, affordable housing, no more racist wars, and no more racist clowns in the White House.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for participating in this valuable session. Maria Abrahamson will now provide closing comments.
The League thanks the candidates for participating in tonight's forum and also thanks those who contributed questions. All of our candidate forums are available for streaming from our website, lwvwashington.org. The forums can also be viewed on Ann Arbor's cable television network. We ask you to urge others to watch these forums and to please share the links with them. If you'd like additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org. That's the League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and federal candidates and current ballot proposals. Want to remind you that all voters are now eligible in Michigan to cast an absentee ballot, and Michigan law permits Election Day registration. Whether you vote by absentee ballot or in person, please vote in the August 2nd primary election. We thank you and have a good evening.